beginning is a very delicate time.
Dune is an amazing novel, but a disparaged film. I'm speaking, of course, of the 1984 David Lynch. David Lynch's Dune! One of my favorite movies, despite its negative appraisal. And even David Lynch is not a huge fan of Dune, but that's okay. I still appreciate it. And I love the novel. It's one of my favorite novels. It's very in-depth in its treatment of a lot of different issues that most science fiction movies don't cover. So I want to give you my analysis of Dune, especially given the fact that Denis Villeneuve is going to do a new version of Dune, along with casting Josh Brolin and a host of other well-known Hollywood names. There's a reason I think Dune is the best-selling science fiction series of all time. It was prescient for the 60s, 1965. Author Frank Herbert was able to foresee a future in which geoengineering, rampant technocracy, geopolitical intrigue and subterfuge, ecology, elite bloodlines, the occult, and religious perennialism all coalesce into a story of unparalleled scope and imagination. In that regard, it functions as both a fictional account of a far distant galactic future, as well as a predictive presentation of today's headlines and scientific achievements. Truly, there is no novel to liken it to, especially in the genre of science fiction relative to its time. While any top 10 sci-fi novels list will undoubtedly include Dune among the ranks, I argue it is utterly unique in its inclusion of the themes and characters that run completely contrary to somebody like Asimov or Orwell. Most science fiction envisions a future of advanced technocratic control where religion has all but been abolished or taken an odd, irrelevant form. Not so here. For Herbert, religion is a central role in the novel. As for technocracy, the novel is decidedly in opposition to the notion. We see humans engaged in the usual court intrigues and conspiratorial machinations that echo Machiavelli's discourses, or The Prince, and in particular of conspiracy, if you read Machiavelli, or his Art of War, which I have a lengthy essay on. With Dune, however, we see not utopianism predicated on mere advance of technology, but subjugation. It's a future in which the good guys are those who are in harmony with nature, who seek to be in a symbiotic, organic relationship with the larger cycle of ecological and cosmic forces. In fact, it is the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV who, working with the Chom Trading Guild and the Bene Gesserit bloodline coven of witches, that seeks to subjugate Arrakis or Dune, the desert planet of unmanageable wasteland, home to the spice melange, the gaseous quench gum style, some kind of drug, right? The consciousness expanding drug that has a hold on the entire known universe. So rather than being presented with a simplistic Manichaean plot of goody-goodies and nasty villains that vie for control, the reader is shown a vast web of interlocking power blocks, alliances, espionage, all of which goes into groups seeking to control the known galaxy over resources and exploitation of resources. And here, the drug trade. So we can think of something like Afghanistan, think of the heroin trade. Parallels to modern geopolitics become unmistakable, and even oil perhaps could play into this, right? The geopolitical power has always centered around the control of resources, both in terms of land and sea. The novel's usage of Sufi mystic symbolism and imagery brings to mind the regions of Afghanistan, where the opium trade has long been a center of global chess moves, particularly in terms of the British Empire and its control and use of opium during the Great Game and its maneuvers with Russia. Frank Herbert was clearly aware of this global alignment, and he includes many of these very human drives in his futuristic anti-imperial novel. The novel immediately made me think of Gould and Fitzgerald's well-known book, Invisible History, which had a profound effect on Oliver Stone. If you want to, you can check out my interview that I did a few years ago with Gould and Fitzgerald on their book. It details the importance of Afghanistan and the Middle Eastern power bloc moves, and it's not just due to its centrality for the drug trade, but it's also due to its mystical significance. Gould and Fitzgerald explained, for example, The ancient home of Zoroastrianism, the mystical Avesta and the Gandhara Buddhism, the Illuminists, the Rashayana cult, and the order of the Bektashi dervishes, the 19th century Afghanistan is the center for all of this. It provides then a mystical underpinning for what today is dryly regarded by many as mere geopolitics. With every advance of the industrial era, the quest for meaning and spiritual enlightenment among Western intellectuals grew, while hypnotism, spiritualism, and occultism found great popularity in European parlor society. With the expansion of the empire interwoven with the expectations of end times prophecies, a spiritual movement linking biblical prophecy to Britain began to grow. Guided by religious zeal and great imagination, the British Israelite movement emerged in the shadows of 1794 with the publication of the Richard Brothers' revealed knowledge of prophecies and end times. Sharon Turner's 1827 The Asiatic Origin of the Anglo-Saxons sought to establish Persia as the ancestral home of the progenitors of Anglo-Saxons. Some in the movement proclaimed British Army officer Sir Henry Rawlinson successful in his 1835 translation of the Persian Behistun inscription as a positive proof and link between Britain and the 10 lost tribes of Israel. Reverend John Wilson's Our Israelite Origin was also a key link in trying to establish the supposed British Anglo-Israeli history. While providing an acceptable Judeo-Christian veneer of justifying the British imperial designs, the practical foreign policy aspects of this nonsense, I think, and as Gould and Fitzgerald seem to say, took on a more magical turn. It was grounded in British Freemasonry, but it organized around the exotic rites and practices of the Near Middle East, a kind of mystical, esoteric foreign policy that gained favor amongst London's elite during the 19th century. Drawing upon Anglo and Franco-Egyptian Masonic secret societies for inspiration, the mystical imperialism sought to create a syncretistic cult-like religion with the overarching goal of uniting the various factions of all religions and cultures within the empire. According to Dreyfus in his book Devil's Game, during this time, many British intellectuals and not a few imperialists were seized with a desire to find a sort of holy grail, a unified field theory of religions, if you will. So this is the milieu in which Herbert is working, as well as with Buddhist and Heideggerian ideas, which I think are key to understanding Dune. Herbert presents Paul Atreides, the novel's would-be ruler, as an apotheosized prophet, the figurehead of a revolution against the corrupt imperial power. The imperial power is primarily concerned with the maintenance of power and its guild-run profits, with a conspicuously secular pragmatic view of politics. The Fremen, the desert-dwelling, superstitious, religious people of Arrakis, secretly maintain large caches of water. These are also a key commodity on Arrakis. And they interpret Paul as the fulfillment of their coming deliverer, prophet, warrior, king, the Kwisatz Haderach.
For he is the Kwisatz Haderach,
the universe's super being. An interesting insight is presented here in terms of the Kwisatz Haderach, the coming universal super being the production of 40 generations of genetic bloodline manipulation by the Bene Gesserit sisterhood, who represent the occult espionage power of the ruling elite. Readers are thus shown a significant secret about realpolitik not evident in most novels: the attempt to manipulate bloodlines by the elite to produce a genetically superior ruling class. In Herbert's vision, the manipulation is done to control the Kwisatz Haderach by these female witches that are intent on being the power behind the throne. If a super being could be controlled, then the sisterhood could control the known universe through their adept skills of sorcery, word magic, and mind control. The sisterhood, we learn, are trained in all manner of espionage skills, occultism, and they function something like Wiccan CIA operatives, if you will, arranged hierarchically under the Reverend Mother Gaius Mulkeen. Gaius brings to mind Gaia, or the Mother Earth, so we have a clear image of the feminine symbology, the female goddess, where we already get the impression that the sisterhood seeks to institute a galactic feminocracy, ousting the mediocre, secular Emperor Shaddam IV. In fact, the Sisterhood's Missionaria Protectiva has even implanted the myth of the Kwisatz Haderach amongst all the known religious sects for this very purpose. The Sisterhood, however, did not count on a man being born out of the planned generational structure to Duke Leto Atreides through Jessica Atreides, a rebellious Bene Gesserit. The irony here is that contrary to the secular, pragmatic imperial power and the cunning feminine power, the masculine patriarchal power returns to the top of this pyramid. Herbert therefore casts a starkly traditional perennial version of events in the future, where the masculine power removes the crafty power of the Bene Gesserits. Religion is not displaced by scientific utopianism, but rather vindicated as the real power in the universe, toppling the cynical and depraved Harkonnen bloodline. In fact, Herbert was even accurate in portraying the degenerate noble fixation on pedo, gross stuff, and rape and abuse of the young, as Baron Harkonnen is shown liking young men. In fact, and by the way, they're relatives. Could you imagine Sting being molested? No, we don't want that. We do not want Sting molested. In fact, in the appendices, we learned that the galaxy had already outlawed the AI robot rule due to humans being enslaved previously by the bots. As Paul ascends to, that was the Butlerian Jihad, by the way. As Paul ascends to power, he even takes a second wife, Princess Irulan, daughter of the Emperor. So Dune is, I think, a decidedly anti-modern novel, and astoundingly so. Most science fiction presents a world that is the opposite of this egalitarian perspective, and the key to progress is glistening spaceships and egalitarian nonsense. Dune, however, is the opposite. Dune presents religion as the key, with a patriarchy and the domination of humans under bots being rejected. Herbert's interest in ecology, geoengineering, and terraforming are also manifest here and predictive, showing a future prescience in regard to public weather control plans. Time magazine has reported on this, mainstream media, and many white papers going back to the 60s and 70s dealing with HAARP and weather modification. Geoengineering is, of course, very real. Modern weather technology has gained and developed tremendous power and technique through VLF, ELF, and lightning control. In fact, DARPA's own budget demonstrates this when it discusses the usage of lightning, ULF, ELF, and VLF power modification and directed energy approaches in terms of HAARP. Herbert, you see, then foresaw this. Herbert knew that the coming future would need to be encoded in science fiction, because the future would be a battle between two rival perspectives of the world. Dune is subject, then, if you notice in the novel and in a few scenes in the David Lynch version, to terraforming. It's terraforming on the part of the Empire. Paul Muad'Dib realizes that in order to outsmart the Chom Trading Guild, that is the money power, and the Emperor, the Polis, and the Bene Gesserit Sisterhood, the occult espionage power, the intelligence agencies, he must bring spice production to a halt, forcing all eyes to look upon Arrakis. By so doing this with his Fremen, Wildmen religious followers, he is able to bring the jihad against the wicked ruling establishment. The novel's focus on ecology is a rebuke to modern scientism, which presumptuously assumes the rape of nature and mankind with no concern for the ecosystem as a whole. This is part of a natural process, I would argue. That is, humans are part of this natural process. All natural hierarchies are restored by Muad'Dib, and only under this hieratic order is a true freedom enabled. Paul and the Fremen, the free men, represent the masculine order, which has here blossomed and come to full fruition, and transformed, therefore, Dune from a wasteland into a living garden. It's almost like a Garden of Eden, if you think about it, right? It's Edenic in the way that it's transformed. In fact, scriptures themselves, the Bible, Isaiah predicts that the Messianic era would be like the desert becoming Eden, becoming a garden, spiritually speaking. This is also why Paul undergoes
the Shai Hulud, the old Father Eternity worm bile ritual, whereby he experiences a crossing of the abyss to enter into that place where the Bene Gesserit witches cannot go. When Muad'Dib returns from this death resurrection ritual, he is deified. He is able to bring an end to the rule of inversion and the unrighteous. It is also worth noting that the imperial power sees mankind as a disease that must be eradicated through population control and reduction. The Sisterhood is evidence of this too, with their attempt to engineer the Kwisatz Haderach and mind control him. The Harkonnen follow suit with young boy dirty slaves, if you will, slaves of an erotic kind, as well as the imperial power brainwashing noble house servants to become assassins for their programmed missions. Think of Yui and the idea of the imperial conditioning. Herbert hints at programs like MK-Ultra, human trafficking, all very real evils that relate to the global power structure. From the standpoint of the occult, it factors prominently then in the Bene Gesserit rituals that the religion of Dune is a syncretistic blending of something they call the Orange Catholic Bible. It is an occult Sufi Islamic religious text, most of which the nobility and elite see as fables. However, the irony here is that the predictions in the Orange Catholic Bible are true. Paul actually is the return, the prophesied one. In other words, he is a kind of Christ-like figure. The Bene Gesserits are a caste of, as we said, skilled sorceresses that are able to use the voice, where thought and sound are connected, to give power to physical events known as the weirding way. Paul is eventually taught this weirding way by his mother, and then teaches the Fremen to use this almost Kabbalistic magical power to destroy with the Word. Paul, if you recall, refers to the Word of God. So again, we have this pseudo sort of Christian analogy made. With bloodlines, esoteric symbolism, hallucinogenic drugs, ecology, terraforming, weather modification, espionage, control of natural resources, etc., Herbert's Dune is undeniably a masterpiece of literary fiction, and I think David Lynch's version is worth appreciating. If you like this analysis, be sure to click subscribe and give me a thumbs up down below. Also, be sure to check out Jay's analysis and definitely click the bell down below to be sure you get the updates.